that little boy in Afghanistan inspired that. I used to have daydreams that I would take his picture and I would go back to Afghanistan and I'd go to the open market and I'd show the picture and I'd say, does anybody know what happened to this boy? Can anybody find him? I always dreamt that I'd find him again. He would be, well, I'm 76, so he would be 68 now or something. Yeah, and your heart breaks over and over and over again in life. If you're interested in the world, even though, as I said, I'm not quite as emotionally affected by everything as I once was, but if you care about the world, it's a very painful thing to care about the world.
Welcome to Justice Matters, the podcast inspiring a world where everyone belongs. I'm your host, Tim Buxton.
G'day there, it's Tim here on Justice Matters, and today's guest is Susan Slotnick. Now, she is an author, she's an artist, and a social justice volunteer. She has spent the good part of 20 years going behind bars, going into correctional facilities for men and boys, using her gift and her passion, dance, to bring hope and healing to these men. A way for them to express themselves, to process, I think, from our discussion, we discovered to process their story, their pain, and to be able to transform that into something beautiful, something that not only can find solace and healing and hope in their own life, but to be an expression to the world out there that beauty resides in all of us. And we can take our pain and we can make something beautiful out of it. And Susan is a shining example of that. She's overcome many adversities growing up. She's written a beautiful memoir called Flight. And though we don't talk so much about that, you do get to know about Susan and her life story and the many adventures she's been on and the way that she has dedicated her life to wanting to make a difference in this world. And at the beautiful young age of 76, in the way that she can still do that, contribute to her community around her. I loved how we were talking about how she spends a couple hours a week going and volunteering for some refugees as a part of the synagogue that she's a part of. And we talk a lot about many different things. It's kind of hard to nail one thing that we discuss, but if there was something that really tied it all together, it was this ability I found to create space for everybody, to create a sense of like everyone's story needs to be heard in the messiness, in the pain, and that we all have something beautiful to offer. And if we all do our part, we can make this world a beautiful, wonderful world for us all to live in. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did talking with Susan, and I hope you check out her work. There's many ways that you can follow her and watch some of the incredible work on her website. There's videos of the dance and choreography that she's produced, and obviously her book that she's written. But without further ado, here's my conversation with Susan Slotnick. It's lovely to finally meet you. Thanks for coming on so late in the evening for you there in New York. It's 8 o'clock in the morning here in Australia. But Susan, lovely to have you on the Justice Matters podcast.
Thank you.
I'm grateful to talk to a fellow New Yorker. Most people don't know, but I like to claim myself as being a New Yorker. My wife's from New York. Whereabouts are you at the minute?
I'm in New Paltz, New York, about an hour and a half up the thruway from New York City.
Okay. So when you say the thruway now, because I've kind of been to your neck of the woods, we holidayed with my brother when he came out and his wife. My wife and I spent some time in Mohonk, I think it's called.
Mohonk.
Yeah, I always pronounce
Mohonk
it a
Mountain
little
House.
bit. It's stunning, beautiful scenery up there. And you've got the Hudson River, I believe, that goes all the way up to upstate New York. And it's such a beautiful part of the world. But for the good part of now 20 years, Susan, you would say, and you're an accomplished artist, expanding your career in many forms of art. You've accomplished many things, and some awards. I mean, even documentaries have been made about you that have won the Cannes and other film festival awards. But you would say, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, that one of your crowning achievements is actually spending time with prisoners up there in your community for the good part of 20 years now, every week going in and spending time with prisoners. And am I right in saying that? And if so, why would you say that?
Well, it's a little less than 20 years. It was about 6 years in the boys' prison,
Mm,
then another 12 years in the men's prison. And then I taught other subjects other than choreography and dance for another year and a half. But since COVID, nobody has gone in to volunteer. It's just starting to open up. And
mm,
because I published my book, which is partly to inspire other people to want to work with incarcerated populations, in order to publish my book, I had to lose my volunteer status.
oh,
I had written the book years ago, but going into the facilities to work with the men was more important to me than publishing it. But then when COVID happened, and it was going to be a year and a half before I could go in. By that time, my assistant had gotten another job, and I had grown much older. And so it was time to publish the book, Dance,
mm,
Flight, The Dance of Freedom is what the book is
mm.
called.
Oh, that's beautiful. Now, you said it took you a long time to write and publish that book. Tell us a little bit about what's what that book meant to you. What's in that book really that um, yeah, for those that who are being introduced to you would find in that book, which is somewhat a memoir of your life, but a bit about the work that you do and have done for 18 years, yeah, in spending time in prisons, well, in particular in your area.
I'm very much a person who enjoys reading biography and memoir. And what I
Mm,
enjoy about it is when the whole truth is told. I don't want to read about somebody who passes themselves off as some kind of a guru or saint. I want to know the life story of somebody, what happened to them, the mistakes they made, the mistakes that were made towards them. So the first half of the book is basically the story of my life as it led me to prison work. So pretty much the upbringing that I had, which was very strange. My mother was mentally ill. My father was an autistic savant. And as I often say when I'm interviewed, I don't know how many people in the world can say that. And I'm always
mm,
wanting to say, anybody else has that background, please get in touch with me.
wow.
And there was quite a bit of emotional abuse and difficulties. So I grew up with a very secret intellectual life. At the same time, I was doing very badly in school. I actually flunked out of high school. At the end of my sophomore year, I finished the year with 5 Fs. But I
Mm.
had read 50 books on the Holocaust,
Oh
at
my.
least 50 while I was in high school. And I was going to Shakespeare in the Park, and I was memorizing Victorian poetry. So I had this very rich inner life. And I came to see when I worked with the men in the prison that they had a similar inner life when they're there. They really study, they really try to improve themselves. So the first half of the book basically is the story of my life with all the truth,
Mm,
the bad things that happened to me, and not the only the good things that I've done.
mm,
And all of it led me to want to work to make the world a better place. And I did that in many ways before I wound up in the prison. I did a lot of work with AIDS survivors through the Catholic Church and women who had breast cancer and homeless people. But I hadn't found the population that I felt would bring out the best that I had to offer. But the men are so gifted
mm,
and talented and smart and have such a big wish to transform their lives. Now, of course, that's not everyone in prison. That would be absurd. But
mm,
by the time a man is willing to do a full length modern dance concert in a men's prison, he's reformed already.
mm.
and you're just bringing a brand new, very unexpected and extremely brilliant tool into the place for them to avail themselves of. And because the type of dancing that I did myself,
Mm.
and because I worked primarily in Black dance forms, African dance, jazz, the Lester Horton technique, which is the technique that the Alvin Ailey Company was trained on, the way that I wanted to move was very powerful, very ballistic. And really, most of my life, because of early things that happened to me in terms of racial politics when I was in junior high
Sure.
school, I became very involved with Black culture starting at about 11 years old. So all the music that I would bring into the prison was basically, on one level or another, Black music, either inspired by Black Americans or directly Black American R&B music. So it really
Wow.
worked for them, the style that I brought to
Yeah, I
them.
could imagine. Um, Tell me what it was like the first time you walked through those prison doors, and what you're carrying a, a,
A
a
boombox
boom box. That's what it was called.
and a
Carrying a boom box
CD.
in
Yeah.
there, and what was going through your mind? Is this going to work? What I mean, I could only imagine what you were thinking.
I don't think that I was at all concerned with whether it would work. Something happens to me
Hmm.
in certain situations where all of a sudden I'm overwhelmed with self-confidence. And then afterwards I go, oh my, I can't believe that I wasn't nervous. I actually was on a very famous talk show with 9 million people listening to it live about 25 years ago, 30 years
Wow.
ago. And everybody was so nervous. And I was like, I felt exactly the way I feel right now, just completely calm. But afterwards, I said, boy, don't you ever get worried about things? So I wasn't in the slightest bit worried.
Yes.
What was a shock was that 20 young men between the ages of 12 and 18 were brought in by the recreation director and the correction officer. And there was a small stage in this facility. And they were all wearing red. And red is a gang color in New York. It's the color of the Bloods. And
Mm-hmm.
usually in prison, you're not allowed to wear red. And the first question that I asked the rec director was, how come they're wearing red? And he said, because it's easier to spot a runaway if they manage to get loose and get into the woods that
Wow.
surrounded the prison. And I think the first piece of music that I played was the Boys Choir of Harlem singing Amazing Grace.
Mm.
And I'm pretty sure the first movement that I did with them was to teach them how to stand, which is very special in dance, and how to lift their arms as if they're moving their arms through water. Just smooth,
Mm.
controlled movement. And they were so magnificent,
Wow.
talented, beautiful, willing, and open that in the first 5 minutes of the class, I had to go into the hallway because I was in tears.
Wow.
That was
Wow.
my first night.
Wow. Um, what do you say to people when you come back from, a time session with them? Like, how do you explain um, the feeling of spending time with these young men, and trying to convey to them what it's like, as if you were to convey it to me or our audience right now?
Well, I worked with them on Sunday nights.
Mm.
And I worked with them no matter what, whether it was Christmas Day, whether it was my birthday. I was
Mm.
there every Sunday night for 5 years. And sometimes if the show was coming up, more. And the sadness that I had to absorb when they would tell me about their lives
Mm.
was incredibly profound. So I didn't talk to people on
Mm.
Sunday nights, not even my husband. I couldn't, I was carrying so much pain
Mm.
that I couldn't have a conversation about what had happened that night. A lot of these boys had children because, you hear a lot about unwed mothers
Mm.
among that population. Well, there are unwed fathers, and they want to
Mm.
be fathers. And there's stories. There was one young man, I think he was 15, and his baby had just died
Mm.
after one of the classes. And there was another young man that wanted to tell me his crime. And I said, I'm not interested. I don't want to know your crime. And he said, no, Miss Susan, I've been thinking about it all week. I have to tell you. And I realized he was hoping for some kind of forgiveness.
Wow.
But his crime was so horrible, and he was such a good kid that he raped his 3-year-old sister.
Mm.
And what he told me was he could never go back to his home because his victim was in his home. And all I said to him was, take off your shoes. It's time to dance. And a minute later, he was moving so beautifully, like he was underwater. And I could see the goodness in him.
Mm.
So I was in this situation where I was interfacing for the first time in my life with a level of stories and violence that I had really not come into contact with myself, although I came into contact with a little bit of violence growing up, but nothing like that. And I couldn't really share it with anybody. And then people would ask the question, and I came to resent the question so much.
Mm.
What did they do?
Mm.
And you look at American TV, and it's wall to wall telling salacious stories about crime. And I never asked one guy in the whole 18 years, what did you do? The other question that I really used to hate when besides people saying, well, tell me what they did to get to prison
Sure.
at 12 years old, 13, 14, was, what are they like?
Mm.
I grew to hate that question, because it's a very prejudicial question.
So
They are
they.
not like anything. They are each
Mm.
unique human beings with a unique, separate story.
Yeah.
And when I went to the movie, got into a lot of film festivals, and I went to Portland, Oregon, to the Portland Film Festival, and afterwards there was a Q&A,
Mm.
and I got the question, what are they really like? And I said, they're really like everybody in this theater.
Right. Wow.
They're all individuals. So I couldn't really talk to people who didn't experience that. Even people who were really engaged with prison work, very progressive people, their heart was in the right place, but they would also say offensive things because they just didn't know any better.
Right. And it's that automatic human nature to categorize, to create a them and an us in pretty much any circle we live in, right? We're very tribal in the way we think. And if there's someone that is different, we've automatically, there are they, not a we. And I love the way you kind of refuse to answer that question,
Well, I would
Susan.
answer it, but I would answer it trying to educate people,
Mm.
but it's a whole nation unto itself inside a prison. And there's so many
Mm.
things I learned that were really not bad, that were interesting. Like the men do a tremendous amount of what they call individual education. So they
Mm.
reminded me of all the books that I read while I was flunking out of high school. Many of them were not high school graduates, but they would read the classics, and they would
Mm.
come to class and want to talk to me about it. And they would ask me, have you read this book? And some of the
Mm.
books I'd read, some of them I hadn't. So they were doing a lot of independent study, and that reminded me of my secret life, where I was considered to be a complete failure. I was told I would never go to college. I was told my IQ was barely
Mm.
average. And here I have written all of these articles and had all this life. So I knew they grew up with those messages as well.
Sure.
And they were willing to really delve into that secret, private life.
Mm.
And I was there
Amazing.
to facilitate that.
Let me tell you about one of our partners, Freedom Broadband. They're an incredible profit for purpose business. Freedom Broadband is your all-in-one internet and telephone service provider, whether it's for your business or your home. Now, their internet connection and speeds are simply amazing, and they're in another league when it comes to the quality of their customer service. But here's what really sets them apart. When you switch to any of their services, they'll donate $5 every month to a nonprofit cause of your choice. As the founder of You Belong, an Australian-based nonprofit charity, one of the greatest challenges we face is fundraising, and I think I can speak for almost all leaders in the nonprofit world when I say that being able to have a residual income coming into your accounts to support your work is a dream come true. And like most nonprofits, our work is dependent on the generous support of individuals and groups that share our passion to empower refugees to integrate and thrive here in Australia. But what that means is that we spend more time and energy looking for ways to raise support, and what I desperately love to be doing is spending that time and our limited resources developing and growing the many successful programs that we run. But here's where our friends at Freedom Broadband come in. You see, a few months back, I was on a 4G wireless connection at home through one of the largest phone and internet companies here in Australia. And each month I was nervous about going over our usage, getting a nasty bill at the end. And I was working on a lot of the podcasting and videos at home, and the speeds I was getting were just painfully debilitating. And I finally decided to give Freedom Broadband a call. And within 2 minutes, I was on the call with Graham completing my application, and within a week I had completely switched over to their $79 a month unlimited plan, and I can tell you firsthand the service has been phenomenal, and I have a direct line to their customer service team whenever I have a question or need assistance. And now the studio and office where I work has switched over to Freedom Broadband as well. We're on their business plan and we haven't looked back. And how cool is this? Little by little, connection by connection, Aussie-owned and locally run Freedom Broadband is now actively supporting the great work of nonprofits in communities all around Australia. Simply by switching your internet to Freedom Broadband, you can help transform the lives of those less fortunate. And that's why I love these guys. And get this, head to freedombroadband.com.au and quote Justice Matters on your application form, and they will donate $50 from the activation fee to support Justice Matters. That's going to enable us to continue this podcast and inspire the world where everyone belongs. That's freedombroadband.com.au. Say goodbye to expensive, mediocre internet with poor customer service, and hello to top-notch internet service and the good feeling of knowing you're supporting a great cause. Join Freedom Broadband today. Quote Justice Matters, and let's partner together with the internet that's helping to change the world.
Yeah, I have a good friend in Chicago that goes in. I'm not, obviously COVID has made it difficult to go in person, but for a couple of years, I believe, is going into a prison to do a bachelor of, I think it was theology or some kind of seminary
I was
studies.
just going to say that. Yeah, it's often religious studies. Very
Yeah.
often.
And so, but she volunteered to go in and study as if she were with them, not it's kind of as a part of her kind of integral way of not only learning from them, but learning alongside them. But you've chosen art, and in particular dance. What is it that, obviously it's something so special to you, but what is so powerful for you that art or dance brings when you go in and spend time with these men?
I'm stuck on the word chosen. When you said you've chosen dance, you've chosen art, because I didn't choose.
Yes.
I was born dancing and I was born drawing. I don't remember a time in my life when I wasn't constantly doing those two things on my own. The pictures of me from the time, it was Super 8 cameras that had no sound, but in every picture I was dancing. I was always drawing. So I didn't choose those two endeavors. They are basically talents that are given through serendipity. I don't consider the talents that I have, and I have 3 talents. I have a writing talent, and I've gotten incredible reviews for my book, and art talent and choreography talent. These are birth accidents. And I often think that if, for lack of a better word, if God threw in the air all the talents that a human being can have and they land, I got my fair share for sure. So I can't claim that. I'm not particularly proud of being multi-talented, although I'm always being reminded of it. And the last
Mm,
podcast person introduced me as a Renaissance woman. What I am proud of
mm,
is what you've also done from our pre-conversation. I directed every talent towards social justice.
mm,
The dances had social justice themes.
mm,
The paintings were very often, although it's much harder to do with paintings, I did a lot of paintings of the men in prison. And certainly the column that I have, the newspaper column, is
mm.
always to teach something about social justice. Nobody that wants to make money or become well known decides to do their art in a prison. So the fact that these movies have been made about me and articles have been written
Mm.
is a shock because I never had the ambition to get my work out there. I've had people watch choreography and say, how come you didn't become a major choreographer? Your choreography is as good as so and so's who's famous.
Sure.
And I would say, because I wasn't interested. In order to do that, you've got to invest a tremendous amount of money. You've got to rent a theater in New York. You've got to do a lot of self promotion. I was never interested in any of that. I was interested in how do I use all this to help people?
Sure.
And really, how do I use all this to help myself? Because
Yeah.
from a very young age, that's how I healed my own wounds,
Okay.
was by helping other people. So I was there for my own reasons in all of
Mm.
these endeavors.
I've had the privilege of talking with many people, even on this podcast, that are have an art gift, in particular media storytelling, journalists, video filmmakers, and they all are using their talent to shine a light on not only injustices but also the incredible people like yourself out there that are trying their part, playing their role in creating a better world, especially for those that have disenfranchised, those that have marginalized in society. But there is something powerful that I guess they each talk about when they describe that gift or that ability to express or to tell creatively, um, and express themselves creatively. There's something powerful in what musicians, what a song can do in the heart and the soul that a
Mm.
that a mere knowledge or education or some kind of form of traditional teaching, let's say, can provide. What can you elaborate for you on how you've seen that power at work in your?
Every artist is different. And a lot of times artists would say it's such a struggle making art. And you have to do 10 bad paintings before you get a good painting.
Mm,
And it's not easy doing writing. You labor over each word and you spend time. All of what I do seems to flow out of me like a river
wow.
with so little effort. I sit mostly my column, I plan in my mind. By the time I sit down to write my column, it's been written in my head and it's just a question of transcribing it. I would say rarely do I feel like I've done paintings that I think are better than other paintings and dances
Sure.
that were better than other dances, but it feels very channeled and very easy for me. And I never really understood why artists talk about what a struggle it is. It's also, you do it if you have to do it. For people who are creative, it's like breathing.
Mm,
You don't feel right if you're holding your breath. You have to make art. And as I've gotten older, that particular monkey on my back has gotten to be weaker. So I can have days now that I'm not making art.
mm,
I can have days where I decide I'm going to watch Dr. Phil,
sure.
or I'm going to take a ride to Monticello, New York and use some discretionary money to play the slot machines. I like doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a very ordinary life as well, but that's really only since I've gotten much older. For most of my life, I had to do something creative every day. And in terms of dance, any strong emotion, I have to dance myself.
Mm-hmm.
So when I found out that my two daughters were both going to have children, they both became pregnant within months of each other. And when I found that out, I knew this song. It's from a Broadway musical called Baby, and it's all about your mother's mother and your mother's mother and this being handed down through
Mm.
mothers and daughters. And I put that song on and I just danced to it about 10 times. I couldn't even talk.
Wow.
I was compelled to dance. So it's a mystery to me too. It's hard for me to even answer the question because I don't remember a time when I didn't have that in my daily life. It's only really recently that my husband says to me, "Wow, you didn't do any art today. You watched TV, you cooked, you went over to the casino for an hour, you know." It's only recently. And I still just started a painting today. So I
Yeah.
would say still most days I'm excited about this painting because when I was much younger, my favorite painter was Wilhelm de Kooning. Do you know who de Kooning is?
I do not know.
Oh, he's a
Sorry.
very famous painter, and I crashed his studio when I was a hippie.
Wow.
I went to East Hampton. He was drunk,
Mm.
and I knocked on the studio door. I said, "Can I see your paintings?" Now, his studio was strewn with practice paintings. His work sells probably one of his paintings sells for in the millions or more, maybe
Mm.
10, $20 million. And he had these long, thin brushes that I had never seen before. Well, the big find for my life today was I found one on eBay, a Wilhelm de Kooning brush, $25. I bought it, and I can't wait to try that out. I'll show you the begin. Maybe I can show you the beginning of the painting a little bit. Can you see some of the strokes
Oh
on it? It's
yeah, I can
really
see.
big. And I'm dying to get that Wilhelm de Kooning painting that paintbrush that I saw.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm still at it, but not as hysterically as I was when I was younger.
And you bringing that up, I mean that my my dad is in his mid 70s, and he's just discovered art.
Hmm.
And this, I'm going to show you one of his first paintings, and
Okay, I'd love to see
you're
it.
gonna be blown away. And it's you know um this is someone, he started just going to a few art classes at his church that he's a part of, and
It's great.
this is one of his first paintings of, I guess, a dog. And my mum loves dogs, and so he's now just draws any kind of dog he can do. He'll do the pencil sketches, he'll do paintings, he'll do
Do you know what his
watercolors.
process is? I mean, does he start with a photograph or
I believe
does he,
I haven't, I think he starts with a lot of photographs and copies. And so again, it, whether what's been fascinating and incredible for him is, and I was just talking with him yesterday, is his absolute passion and love now for art and expressing. He says, "I'm gonna, for each of my kids and their wives, and I'm gonna do a portrait sketch of each of you and give it to you now for your birthdays." And he's got a long line of projects and requests now of just be, as a
that's
proud kind of
nice.
artist. But it was always there. It was always in him. It wasn't until so long, and I can only just imagine going into a prison who, with a bunch of men who in many respects are dejected, feel like they've got nothing of worth, of gift, of talent, of ability, and going in there and bringing out in them things that they never knew existed, and maybe in ways that would be so contrastingly um, uh, seen as respectable for a man with the background that they've had, to be doing. What's that like for you?
Well, doing art in prison is very prevalent, and you don't need anything except a pencil and a pen. So they can do art on their own. Writing is very prevalent. They write letters, they write essays, they write
Mm,
poetry. The shock to them was dance because
yes.
they had done like club dancing growing up, but to do modern dance, and on my website, you can actually see them, and it's mind
Yeah.
boggling.
Oh, I've seen several of them. Blown away.
Unbelievable. What's going on inside of them is so obvious, and they're so beautiful. And I trained them. I did the impossible. I said,
Mm,
I had four youth dance companies and a local dance school all my life. And I said, I'm going in. These men are, some are in their 20s, some are in their 30s, some are in their 40s, up to their 70s. I'm going to train them like they came to my dance school when they were 5.
mm,
I had them doing plies, tendus, turns, contractions. I had them working with floor exercises. And, a lot of them were very built up. So their muscles, they were very bound.
mm,
And it was for many of them, they felt the dance training, the actual dance training freed up their muscles in the way that lifting weights in the gym for years and years never did. They felt like their muscles all of a sudden got air in them.
wow.
Yeah, they were very shocked by their own beauty, is
Mm,
all I can say.
yeah. And I could only imagine. I think there's ways in which when you tap into um, your body in new and creative ways, the impact it even has on your heart, your mind, the um,
Well, that's very interesting because there's now research that slow, sustained movement, which is continuous, not necessarily hip hop movement, which has a lot of stops and starts,
yeah,
but very lyrical, slow, controlled movement
mm,
over time to beautiful music. It changes your brain chemistry. This is a known fact. It affects your brain exactly the same way that chemicals like Prozac do. It stimulates all the feel good chemicals in the
mm,
brain. And that this is now known as a scientific fact. So, of course, when I went in there, they would say things to me like, I don't know what happens, but when
mm,
I'm dancing and after I'm dancing, I don't even know I'm in prison. I'm so happy. I can't believe how joyful and happy I feel. And on my website, there is a documentary that was made by CBC Radio in Canada. My website is filled with everything, so you got to search a little bit.
yeah,
But the actual documentary was recorded inside the prison during dance class, and the men are
mm,
talking about what dance did to them.
wow,
And I would say, even more than the film, which won at Cannes, and there were two films made, one's a feature and one's a smaller film. The radio documentary is the most revealing of what they're really
mm,
like. If anybody is interested, it would blow your
mm,
mind to listen to them talk about dance and what dance meant to them.
mm,
And it's called Figures in Flight. All you
mm,
have to do is Google Figures in Flight CBC Radio. The
mm.
man who made the documentary won a Gabriel, which is the Academy Award of Radio Documentaries. And it
Wow.
isn't because only of what I did. I mean, I was very good with them and used my
Mm,
skills, but who they were
mm,
is so revealing on that documentary. And that's why I was so great with them. They brought out the best in me. We can't do anything
mm,
to help the world if we're trying to plant our beautiful dream in bad soil. There has to be support. And you probably know this from your work
yeah.
with refugees, that there's got to be funding, there's got to be other people, there's got to be people who open up the doors and say, yes, we want this. Yes, this is a good thing. So what I did didn't work everywhere because the soil wasn't always prime for it. But Woodburn had a fantastic deputy of programming who is still a very, very close friend of mine. And she was very wonderful in facilitating the dance program and also rehabilitation through the arts, which is run by a woman called Catherine Vokins. And she does theater, art, dance, which I think I was the first person to do dance, and she's tried to continue it, and I think she has. Um, and that those two people created the soil through which this program could flourish.
Wow.
When I tried to teach some dance after COVID, just before COVID, I was working in the county jail because I didn't lose my volunteer status for the county jail, but just
Mm,
for the state system. And I had great talented people there too, but they wouldn't dance. It
mm,
wasn't the right environment. First of all, they were in short-term incarceration, so they weren't
sure.
so hell-bent on working on themselves. Not
Mm,
that anybody should be, that's no great
no.
reason to be there for too long, but
Yeah. I, yeah. I mean, even as you kind of talk, my mind wonders at you know, the Jewish rabbi story of putting seed on some soil that has rocky and some soil that is um, got fertile soil, and some soil that is maybe sprouts for a little bit, but the weeds come and strangle. I think you know the story I might be
I
alluding
don't
to.
actually.
It's the Jewish rabbi Jesus who actually told this parable um, when he was talking about, in his words, the kingdom of heaven. You know what it is like, and um, what's it like though when you see time and energy and effort maybe that has promise in somebody, but then
Then
because
they
I'm
break your
sure,
heart.
and then they break your heart. Yeah, because
Oh
I'm
yeah.
sure, like you've been in this radio for long enough to have experienced some wonderful stories, but I think
I've
it's
had my
only,
heart broken several times,
yeah, what,
seriously broken,
yeah,
and had to work, but not only in the prison, mind you,
sure. I
but
mean, this is
within my
life, right? This
family,
is
within,
real.
this is life. And you have to work really hard not to become closed off
Mm,
when that happens, because the way our brains are wired, it's like if somebody talks to you and they say, I love your podcast. I love all the podcasts. I listen to it. It's terrific. You're going to like that compliment. You're going to remember it. But the one person who says, I don't like what you do, you'll
mm,
carry that with you and remember it. That's going to play in your head over
sure.
and over again because we're wired up for survival. So the way our brain works is that anything that threatens our survival looms much larger than compliments and love and the positive things. So I would say there were one, two, three, four instances of situations where I got my heart broken
Mm,
within the prison system by men when they got out. And I just had to work extremely hard to remember that's four out of maybe 200 people you worked
mm,
with. So you have to train yourself to not focus your attention on the negative things because the negative things, just due to brain wiring,
mm,
become very larger than the positive things.
sure.
And, one man went back and that was terrible.
Mm,
Another man cheated me out of some money. That was
mm,
terrible. Actually, that was terrible.
mm, mm,
Then let me see what was the other. Oh, then there was someone I was extremely close with, maybe more than anybody, and helped him in his life very much. And he got out and eventually just ghosted me, just stopped
oh,
answering emails, um, which is understandable to some degree. But in this particular situation, it was very hard. I mean, I'm a human being. I
sure.
expect to have, when I give my best to somebody, I expect to get back positive energy.
Mm,
I'm not a, when they would call me a guru, I'd say, don't call me guru. I don't want to be anybody's guru. Don't put me on a pedestal. It's a very shaky place. You can
mm,
fall off at the drop of a hat.
mm,
So I'm just like everybody else. My feelings get hurt.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah. No, it I could imagine um, you've seen the best in them when everyone would see the worst. And even if they do revert to that worst or whatever, not put,
Not even
to
worse,
categorize it
just
in best and worst. Just
I would say
when yeah,
disappointing,
exactly.
period.
That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
When people do disappoint us, because we all do, right?
Yes.
That's just we're foolish to think that we're not going to disappoint, but to choose then to remember them in their best light, I guess, is then a wonderful and transformative gift too, I could imagine, because that's kind of something we actually have to, I think we have to apply to all people in all relationships. If we're to move on, whether they're a part of our lives moving forward or not, that ability to choose to see people in who we know them, who they are truly are to be, the good, um, the best. Does that resonate with you at all?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I didn't really want to keep in touch with too many people. I've worked with hundreds.
Mm.
That would be all I would do. But
Yes.
this one particular person was probably the only one that I actually thought that I would stay in touch with.
Mm.
And I didn't hear from him for a long time. And then all of a sudden I get a call. It's my birthday, which they always celebrated every year because it's the same people year after year. I worked with the same exact men 10, 12 years, 15 years. And they knew when my birthday was, and there was always a big to do about that. And after him not answering messages and my wondering what did I do wrong because you always look to yourself, I get this call out of the blue. I want to come up and surprise you for your birthday. So a lot of the time when we're disappointed, the person we take everything so personally.
Wow.
You
Yeah.
know, he was going through stuff, but I would be so shocked not to get a response. And then after that, he went back to not responding again.
Wow.
You know, it's just we see ourselves, I mean, we have egos.
Mm.
They're a very necessary aspect of being human.
Mm.
Without an ego, you're prey to almost anything.
Mm.
So it's very easy to have your feelings hurt and you wonder what you did wrong and all of that. But for the most part, I feel like I could not have written my book if I really cared what other people thought of me. Basically, there's very few people whose opinion of me really matters to me.
Mm.
I would say my husband of 53 years. The people closest to you, your children, your husband, your lifelong friends, those are the only people who know you well enough to have a respectable opinion of you.
Mm.
So those are people that you go to all your life and you say, did I do right here? Or give me
Mm.
some advice and all of that. But for the most part, just the big world out there of people who come into contact with you. There's so much meanness going on right now and
Mm.
division and anger. And we're in a terrifying period of people not being interested in the truth.
Mm.
In my whole lifetime, I have never, ever experienced anything close to people with the truth staring them in the face and droves of people not wanting to believe it, whether it's the pandemic or in politics.
Mm.
It's just terrifying.
I find that uh interesting for you to say that. I mean, you talked with me earlier about when the war in Vietnam was going on, you standing up and being involved in that fight, your commitment to um, stand alongside the Black and African American community and people of color, and to stand in that fight of racial equality throughout your work, in your dance company and in all areas of your life, in your relationships and the people you speak very dear to of. But for you to say that now, today, in this time, can can you frame that for me a bit more? Because I mean, here you were traveling as a young person, even through Afghanistan, and then to see the what played out in that country as well, and the the terrible atrocities that we're still seeing. They're making frontline news today in the war and the impact there on the innocent children and women and families and men in that country. That you saw the beautiful side of them. What makes you say what you just said in light of all of that and your experiences?
Well, the world has always been a terrible place. There's always been genocide. There's always been suffering children. There's always been wars. There's always been people who have closed hearts, and there's always been tens of thousands of people trying to change it. Why I'm saying that now is because for some inexplicable reason, and I've been thinking about this a lot because I wanted to try to unpack this in maybe my newspaper column, I have no insight as to why people are behaving the way they're behaving today. I've never seen it. You just take the vaccine issue in America and you see what's going on with people. Or what we just went through with 4 years of the former president. People can have absolute, or just what happened on January 6th when the Capitol was attacked, the insurrection. The stuff is on TV. Thousands of people with weapons beating people. And then a congressman will get on TV and say it was a normal day of tourism in Washington, D.C. And thousands of people will believe him. This is something I've never seen before. I don't understand it. I don't know if it has to do with global warming or something bizarre going on in the chemistry of the planet. But to see absolute monolithic proof of something like the insurrection, and then really have tens of thousands of people say it didn't happen, or it's a hoax, or it was really the opposite people politically who came in and dressed as I've just never experienced anything like it. And I think that if I had some understanding of what's going on, it would be good. It would be good for me to write about. It would be good for me to try to, as Dr. Phil says, you can't change what you don't acknowledge. So we're in a situation where there's so little acknowledgement going on, and deeply on the progressive side too.
Yeah.
There's a lot of craziness on the progressive side also. There's a distortion of facts on the progressive side that are just unbelievable.
Yeah.
I've never
You
seen
know,
anything like it. People don't want to know the truth because I think, okay, here's my insight.
good, because I've got something for you too.
The
You
truth, the truth is threatening because it's so complicated, because it
mm,
doesn't fit. People are desperate for meaning in their life right
yeah.
now. They are desperate for their lives to mean something. And so what they've done is they've attached themselves to an ideology to feel meaning and safety, maybe
Mm.
partly because of the pandemic, partly because of global warming. So they attach to an ideology. It's on both sides,
Oh,
extremes.
sure.
And no
Ideologies exist
matter
in both
what,
extremes.
no matter what, there's no common sense on either side at the extremes.
Mm.
And I've never seen that. I mean, with the Vietnam War, it was the first war that was on television.
Mm.
So as you saw the casualties and as you saw people coming back and young men coming back in body bags, people's minds were changed from that
Mm.
by the tens of thousands. They would see the news on TV, they'd say, I was for this war, now I'm against this war. We're in a time period where no matter what you see on TV, if you don't feel like believing it, you just out of hand say it's not true.
You don't
It's a
have to.
form of insanity that
Well,
I'm seeing.
and there's the ability to create deep fakes and create such believable lies. You know, we've got really good at that. Our marketing machine has done its job incredibly well. When you talk about the truth, reality and life and everydayness being extremely messy and complex, and that desire for us to, I guess, go back to that age of simplicity. Now, it is beautiful. I've got young children that they see the world in such wonder and simplicity, and you could, my daughter pulled her tooth out, and we're talking about the tooth fairy, right? And there's this, there is something wonderful in beauty, but obviously every child, we don't want to be childish. We might want to become childlike as we grow and develop, but there is this growth and development, and quite often it's towards this realization that this world is complex. And in fact, it's not just complex, it's perplexing at times.
Yeah.
And the truth cannot be dulled down into a simplistic, simple answer. This is, there's a movie called Soul on Disney's, and the end, or I don't know if it's a short from that film, but it says, and this is the meaning of life. And it was about to say what that was, and suddenly it ended. And so I think there's this realization of that which we long for in one another, in relationships. It's complicated.
It's very
And
complicated.
we have to lean into that. And I love your dedication to inclusivity, this sense that, I'm not going to deal with the them and the us. I'm going to strive to fight to create a world. I mean, You Belong is kind of the name of our charity, because it's striving to fight and help refugees to belong and to integrate and to thrive in a foreign land that everything's screaming at them, you don't belong. But to find that sense of commonality, even in the messiness, to find that sense of beauty, even in that which is different and maybe confronting to us, to look for an always inclusive view on things, leaves room and space for, I think, us all to figure out what it is we're here to bring. And I think if it's to bring hope to people's lives and to bring joy and beauty out of the ashes and out of the mess, then I think we're onto something. But I think the complexity is what can be so paralyzing for so many people, so difficult to deal with. The other thing, and correct me if you think I'm wrong, because that kind of stuck out to me when you were talking. But the other thing is this idea of moral trauma, not just in an individual's life.
Would you say those two words again? Moral trauma?
Yeah, moral trauma. And it's I was listening to a podcast called The Line. It was about a recent Navy SEAL that was put on trial for murdering an ISIS captive, right? They captured an ISIS, and the podcast goes into the ups and downs. It's one of those like crime podcasts, and a psychologist kind of talks about what someone who's conscripted into, to be a Navy SEAL, you've got to be okay with committing some pretty terrible acts in the name of fighting for the greater good, right? But we see this throughout all society, right? And all empires and all war and all kind of conflicts and violence, and not just what we've seen in America in the last several decades, but in other empires and countries and warfare, is this justification of that which we know to be cut right across what it means to be human. And the trauma then that can live within a person and can be is the psychologist is actually a real form of trauma that needs to be acknowledged, not only in an individual though, but on a larger scale within a society, can actually suffer from this deep sense of moral trauma. And to me, I think, without being a psychologist and without kind of going too deep into what that means, there's something in there that I think you would have witnessed the pain and the trauma and the the anguish of having to, you know, um navigate that, not only, you know, yeah, as you kind of spend your time with with the men in prison, where they're kind of, it's thrown in their face, you could say. Does that make?
Well, I'm so stuck on two words that you uttered about several paragraphs ago that shot out at me when
Yeah,
you said that the Navy SEAL, was it,
yeah.
that he had to do bad things for the greater good. The
Mm,
two words that shot to me like a rifle were greater good,
mm,
because I see that people who think they know what that is are very often the problem.
mm.
That's part of where I would call, I'll address the moral trauma thing, but this is something that
Sure.
I got
Yeah,
stuck
no,
in
that's
my head
great.
on how much different groups feel that they know what the greater good is. We don't know what the greater good is. The greater good, we have to keep the Syrian refugees at a minimum for the greater good. What if that's not true?
Mm,
What if they can be absorbed? What if they can inform? What if they can teach? What if they can make human beings that open their arms to them feel like their lives have meaning? And then maybe they won't have to believe that the insurrection really happened, because they'll have real meaning in their lives. So I see people thinking they know what the greater good is as
mm.
not such a great good. In terms of moral trauma, what I've noticed in myself, and I'm going to be 76 on November 11th, Armistice Day, which is a
Oh,
day of
wow.
signing peace.
Yeah.
What I have found is that I had way more moral trauma with the Vietnam War. I got exhausted.
Mm,
That's why I picked one myopic thing. I've been working for refugees in my synagogue group
mm,
for the last maybe 5, 6 years. And I have never felt the moral trauma about what's happening to them that I did in the Vietnam era.
mm.
Because as you get older, you've been bombarded with so much injustice over and over and over again that you stop having that incredible emotional reaction to it. I mean, during the Vietnam War, I couldn't sleep at night thinking about the war.
Mm,
But the important thing is, even if that moral emotion, the emotion you feel at seeing injustice, even if that wanes in a lifetime, and I think it does,
yeah.
you can't stop doing the work,
Mm,
because all that matters is the work, not how upset you are about what's going on in Afghanistan, not how upset you are when you see the horrible picture of the little boy, which was very upsetting, washed up on the shore. I think about it,
mm.
I'm already
Yeah.
feeling like I'm going to cry. You
Yeah.
know the picture, the
Yeah. The little Kurdish
iconic
boy.
picture.
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
I was,
You know,
yeah.
even if, but let's say you look at that picture and you don't feel a deep sense of moral outrage. That's your ego. That's about you. That isn't doing anybody any good, that moral outrage. You still join the committee. You still raise the money. You still do whatever you can to make the world better. So I was amazed when I joined this group helping the Syrian refugees that I didn't have the deep disturbance that I had when I was younger,
Mm,
because I've just been around too much of it. I'm very distressed by things, but not like I used to be.
mm,
I think what's going on in Afghanistan is a travesty,
mm,
an absolute travesty. The best piece of choreography I ever did in my life was inspired by an experience I had in Afghanistan with a little boy, with a little shoeshine boy from Kabul. I still can't even talk about it.
yeah.
And I wrote an article, not in my column, but a big article called, gosh, so long ago I forgot it, something about bereavement.
Mm,
And I wrote about that little boy who I met when he was 11 and I was only 24. and he lived in Kabul. He was a street boy, and he shined shoes, and we had sneakers on. So he couldn't shine our shoes. But every day that I was in Kabul, I bought him a pair of shoes in the open market, or shoes for his sister or his brother, and I paid him to shine his own shoes. And when the first war in Afghanistan happened, and obviously I still care, even if it's not as much as I did in college, I couldn't stop thinking about him. His name is Ahmed, and
Mm.
I couldn't stop thinking about him. And I tried to trace what could have happened to him. Did he become a Taliban? Did he ever
Mm.
have a wife? Did he ever treat women the way that I wrote a whole article going through his life and who he might have become. And then meeting him inspired a 20-minute dance, which I think might be on my website, called Welcome to the World. And
Mm.
he inspired it, but it was all about the awful things that happen in the world and the wonderful things that happen. And it ends with people just lifting each other up above the crowd. And then children, adults, there were little kids in this piece. And then they get let down into the embrace of somebody, the nurturing, compassionate embrace of somebody is how the dance ends. That little boy in Afghanistan inspired that. I used to have daydreams that I would take his picture and I would go back to Afghanistan and I'd go to the open market and I'd show the picture and I'd say, does anybody know what happened to this boy? Can anybody find him? I always dreamt that I'd find him again. He would be, well, I'm 76, so he would be 68 now or something. Yeah, and your heart breaks over and over and over again in life. If you're interested in the world,
Mm.
even though, as I said, I'm not quite as emotionally affected by everything as I once was, but if you care about the world, it's a very painful thing to care about the world. There are people right now all over the world shopping and watching television, and, you know, it's a burden to care about what's going on. It's not easy. And I
Mm.
don't think you choose it. I think that's another heritable quality. When I was working with the Osborne Society teaching parenting classes,
Mm.
there was a whole lesson on resilience of one of the many lessons. There were about 15 classes and they each covered a different subject because he was teaching men how to parent from prison. It was about parenting from prison.
Wow.
I loved it, but I was only a substitute and I got to do it very little. But the little bit that I did, I really enjoyed. And there was a whole class on resilience. And they said the research on resilience is that resilience is an inherited quality. You can encourage it in your children, but you will see that you have young children. You'll see you have one child who's more resilient than the other. It's an inherited quality. And I think that people who care about the world and are resilient and can deal with the heartbreak of caring about the world. These are people that can have a small impact somewhere. I don't think what I did in the prison is any big deal, to tell you the
Mm.
truth. What you did, I was thinking when you were talking before we started the actual podcast part of the podcast, and you told me about your work with Syrian refugees, going through my mind was, I've done nothing compared to the that's so much bigger than anything I've done. But if each person picks one little thing, I'm going to teach dance in prison.
Mm.
I'm going to raise money for Syrian refugees. I'm going to work with trying to make the healthcare system better. I'm
Mm.
right now every Wednesday afternoon. The one thing that I do is I feed refugees in a on Wednesday afternoon. I go to a food pantry and I work for 2 hours distributing food to mostly Guatemalan refugees that can't go to other food pantries because a lot of them are illegal and they're afraid to get picked up.
Mm.
And what do? I'm looking at bananas and I'm working really hard to, as they take a grouping of food, I'm responsible for putting another grouping on. It's hot and I'm sweating and there's no applause, there's no movies, there's no
Mm.
people telling me that I'm their guru. It's just scut work.
Mm.
It's a little thing that I do 2 hours a week. But if everyone found something,
Mm.
I was thinking about justice when I thought about being on your podcast. I
Mm.
was thinking we would talk about what is justice. We didn't, but it was something that crossed my mind.
I
And I
think we
thought,
did, but just in a different
in a
way.
different way, in a
Yeah.
different way. We didn't talk
Yeah.
about it in this direct way. But what I was thinking was this simple realization that we don't need justice if we don't have injustice.
Mm.
That's where the attention has to be. The justice work is done because we are overwhelmed with injustice. But we don't even need that concept if everybody just did what they were told to do by all the core religions. Simple. My rabbi once said to me, all the Jewish books, and there's tens of thousands, and the comments on the Jewish books and the comments on the comments of the Jewish books, and everything, the entire 2,000-year liturgy can be boiled down to one sentence. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's great because I'd like to understand everything about my religion. And I said, what's the sentence, Rabbi? And he said, do unto others as you
As
would
you
have them
do.
do unto. If we
Yes.
just did that, everything would change.
Yeah.
The unfortunate thing is that everybody would have to do it.
Yeah.
So I feel like there's people who are causing problems and people trying to solve problems. And here are the people causing the
Sometimes we're
problems.
both.
We're both very often, but not to the extent
Yeah.
of the problems I'm talking about.
Yeah.
The problems of the Syrian refugees, the problems of war. I mean, we all cause problems, of course, in our lives. We don't always behave justly in our personal lives.
Mm.
But what I mean is, if we could end war, if we could
Mm.
treat people like we want to be, if there was no violence, if we cared about the planet. I walk 5 miles a day
Mm.
in the most beautiful surroundings. And there's little like stations where you get the bags to take your dog poop and put it in a bag. Usually the trail is very good, but all of a sudden you'll see a big wad of dog poop right near that station, or somebody throws their garbage in the middle of the path. What if everybody didn't do that?
Mm-hmm.
We wouldn't have to work so hard
Mm.
to make things better. I don't know. I'm on
Well,
my
no, no. What I love what you shared is that we all have a gift. We all have something that is there to offer this world, to make it beautiful, to make it a world where we all belong, a world where everyone can, and we need each other's gift. Like that's the reality. Is I'm not like you, Susan. I don't. I mean, I don't have this innate gifting to be in that flow creatively that you do, but I have something else that you don't,
how
and
you
we all
do.
have something else that each other doesn't. And I think that call that you put out there to live into that which is your gift, live into that which you have to offer the world. And I think many people are just they don't think they have worth and have anything to offer, so it's convincing them that they are good and that they do have something of worth, and then creating the space where they're free to be that, and to offer that.
You don't have to have a gift. I'm thinking about my friend Chris. She walks. She's not an artist. She appreciates art.
Mm,
She picks up the garbage.
mm,
She picks up garbage on the path every day. I don't pick up the garbage, especially since COVID.
mm,
I don't guess she brings her rubber gloves and she makes herself a garbage collector. I don't see as what I do
mm,
with the movies or the radio documentary or the 200 Men as in any more significant than what she does. In a way, I find what she does more significant. I've told her this and she said,
mm.
stop it. You make such a big deal out of it. But there's no thank you. There's no applause. There's no brouhaha to what she
Mm,
does. It's very pure. And I think that when I find myself, and I've only gone about 4 times to feed the Guatemalan refugees,
mm,
but it's hot in the
mm,
summer here.
mhm.
And they come and you got to work fast.
Right.
And it's boring work, and you can't speak their language, and you can't be Mother Teresa to them. You're just giving them a onion, and then you give them a banana. And I'm thinking this is probably the purest volunteering I've ever done,
Mm,
because everybody can do that.
yeah.
And why did that doesn't
Well,
matter any less.
right. Well, and and in one sense, it's you can't do everything, but you can do something. And if
Yeah,
there is a
everybody.
commitment to just do something and to find that which is which you can do and you feel is what you should do, then do it, right? Um, thank you so much for um, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for this conversation. Like, it's actually been such a delight to just chat with you and to get to know you, Susan. And
Thank you.
who knew where this conversation could have gone, but I thoroughly enjoyed just going back and forth. And um, but I do want to show my appreciation for you for not only coming on so late in the evening, but for your life. And sometimes you do need to be thanked for your service. And so thank you so much for seeing the unseen. Thank you for serving those wonderful men and boys, and the impact that you won't ever see. You just be encouraged to know that I'm confident it's gone a lot further than what you could imagine, the ripples of that. So I appreciate you, and I'm really grateful for our time together.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Justice Matters. I'd also like to shout out to the Patreon community that financially supports this podcast. Guys, thank you so much for your support. And you can join them simply by going to patreon.com/Justice Matters, where a simple donation of $5 a month, you can become part of the Patreon community and get access to behind the scenes content and extras that I share just with you. And lastly, there is another really important way that you can help support the podcast, and that's simply by rating it or leaving a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, maybe by subscribing on YouTube. Yes, we are a video podcast as well. Guys, thank you so much for listening in to this episode of Justice Matters. Please come again soon. I can't wait to share more episodes with you. Thank you so much. I'm your host, Tim Buxton. Thanks for listening.